Hi, my name is Krista Poulton and I'm a medical herbalist. Thank you for joining me on my harvest series on YouTube, where I'm going to be teaching you how to harvest your own plants and prepare them with herbs that might be growing in your own backyard. Today we're going to be on episode 1 on how to harvest your rose hips. So rose hips are these beautiful hips that come after the roses are done flowering. And rose hips are packed full of vitamin C. So here we have a rose hip, and we can just be pulling it off the tree, kind of just doing like a little bit of a twist. And you can see that there is the sepals and the petals at the top of the rose hip. And that's going to be the more bitter part of the rose hip, so we're going to be taking that part off. So just by pinching it off, boom, there you have it. Rose hips have a big seed on the inside, and so typically if you're going to be eating the rose hip right then and there, which is packed full of vitamin C, tons of vitamins for your system, it's a great time because colds and flus are everywhere right now in the fall. You can be just eating kind of around. So just eating the round part, and then you can see on the inside it's packed full. Let's see if I can it's packed full of these seeds. And that part isn't the most yummy part to be eating. So you can see all these seeds on the inside. That's not the nicest part to be eating. So if you're eating just around the rose hip, it's quite yummy and very nutritious. So today we're harvesting the Nooka rose, which is the wild rose that grows on Vancouver Island. And like I was mentioning earlier about the vitamin C content in the rose hips, it's great for preventing colds and flus. You can be taking it while you have a cold and flu, but it's better to be taking it as a preventative measure during the cold and flu season. Rose hips are also sour astringent, and they are also sweet and cool. And they're really good for heat and irritation conditions, and that's because they have a cooling astringent action. Rose hips are also great for acute inflammatory conditions of the respiratory tract, as are the petals. I love making the rose hips into a medicinal mead, which is what I'm going to talk about later on. But you can be doing so many other things with rose hips. You can be making a tincture, you can be making tea with it. It's a beautiful October day, and I like to be harvesting my rose hips right around Thanksgiving, sometimes when I have a little bit more time. And I often like to harvest my rose hips, and then I go home and I'll make a pumpkin pie, and then while my pumpkin pie is baking, I'll be taking off the sepals. So taking off that top part of that. I also really like to make rose hips into medicinal mead. I'll dry my rose hips for tea. I'll also make some medicine with them as well, so I'll tincture them, which we'll talk about later. But mostly I like to make my rose hips into a medicinal mead. A medicinal mead is kind of like a wine, but instead of using sugar, which is typically like a white sugar that they'll ferment with, I'm going to be using honey. So I'm going to have some really nice, good quality honey with my beautiful rose hips. I'm going to ferment that together with some yeast, and then I'm going to bottle it later on, and then I'm going to have some nice medicinal mead for the winter time when I want to be sharing a drink of some rose hip love with some of my friends or my family. You can see that these ones here are starting to get a little bit shriveled, and that's okay. But if I can, that's getting a little bit late in the season for harvesting some of these ones. They might just have had less water, so they are a bit more softer than what I typically like. Versus over here, we have some beautiful rose hips that are more of a smooth consistency. I'll just pull it over on this side. They're a bit more of a smooth consistency. Still have that nice, beautiful red color, and they're going to be nice and juicy for eating. You have to remember that the rose hips are food for other animals in the environment, so we don't want to be taking too many rose hips. So usually a rule of thumb that I have for harvesting is taking no more than 25% of what is on the plant. So I don't want to be taking all of the rose hips, so I want to be leaving them for the birds and maybe the deer to be eating, potentially other humans to be eating. So I'm only going to be taking what I require for my own personal use and potentially for some of my patients as well. So here are some beautiful rose hips. You can see that they have this nice, beautiful red color. And they have the sepals still attached. So when you're harvesting your rose hips, there might be other plants that look really similar to rose hips. So these are hawthorn berries. They are not a rose hip. So the rose hips look like this, and they have those sepals on the top. Versus hawthorn berries, they don't have those sepals on the top. They have a very small one. My basket is full of beautiful rose hips. I'm going to take them home, and while I'm making my pumpkin pie, I'm going to be taking off these sepals, and then I'm going to be preparing them. It's probably going to be freezing these ones, and also be making some tea while I'm having my pumpkin pie. Thank you for joining me on the first episode of Harvest Your Own Medicine. I hope you learned a lot about how you can use rose hips, how you can harvest your rose hips, and we'll be talking much more in future episodes on how to harvest other things that you can find in your backyard or in your neighborhood that can be medicine for yourself and how to prepare them. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Krista Poulton, a medical herbalist. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes coming up.
If you want to be hip, try some rose hips. If you want to get a little more vitamin C in your diet, why don't you try it? If you want to be hip.